Think about the last time you kicked to the finish line of a 5K race. Your legs were on fire, your lungs were screaming, and every stride felt like it took everything you had. Now think about the last time you hit mile 22 of a long race or a really hard long run, and your body just quit on you. Your legs started to feel like bricks, your pace completely fell apart. You couldn't will yourself to go faster no matter how bad you wanted to. Those two experiences, while both painful, feel completely different, right? And they are. They come from different systems inside your body, and those systems fail for different reasons. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what's happening under the hood when you run, because once you understand it, you will never look at your training plan the same way again. Welcome to the VMAX Running Podcast, where the goal is to help you become a better runner than the one you were yesterday. I'm your host, Coach Brad, and today we are going under the hood. We're talking about your body's 3 energy systems, which I like to think of as your 3 engines. And we're going to break down how each one works, what each one feels like when you're out on a run, and most importantly, how to train all of them so they're working together to make you faster, stronger, and more resilient. Now, first of all, gotta address the elephant in the room. I know energy systems might sound like something from a college biology textbook, and I don't want this to feel like an academic lecture. We're gonna cover the science, but we're gonna keep it very approachable and hopefully actionable. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand why your easy runs, your tempo runs, your intervals, and your sprints all feel so different from each other. And more importantly, you'll understand why each of these runs belongs in your training plan and what it's actually doing for you. So with that said, let's get right into it. Okay, so let's start with the basics. And again, I promise this is going to be more interesting than it sounds. Everything your muscles do when you run, every single stride, every single push-off, every arm swing, requires a molecule called ATP. Think of ATP as the energy currency that your body runs on. It's like cash. Your muscles can't do anything without it. But the thing is, your body only stores a tiny amount of ATP at any given moment. We're talking about enough to fuel maybe a few seconds of all-out effort. So your body has to constantly manufacture more ATP in real time while you're running. And the way it manufactures that ATP changes depending on how hard you're working and how long you've been at it. That's where your 3 energy systems come in. You've got the Phosphagen system, the Glycolytic system, and the Oxidative system. And I want to give you an analogy right up front that I think makes this whole thing click a little more intuitively. And I'm going to come back to this throughout the episode. Think of your body like a car with an automatic transmission that has 3 gears. First gear is your Phosphagen system. It's all about quick acceleration. When you floor it from a stoplight, that burst of speed is first gear. It's powerful, but it tops out fast. Second gear is your glycolytic system. This is your medium range gear. You can drive at pretty high speeds in second gear, but you can only sustain it for so long before the engine starts to overheat. Third gear is your oxidative system. This is your highway cruising gear. It's slow to get up to speed, but once it's humming, it can keep you going for hours. It's built for the long haul. Your body shifts between these gears for the same reason a car does: efficiency and sustainability. And just like a car, you need all 3 working well if you want to perform at your best. One important thing I want to bring up here before we go any further: all 3 of these systems are running simultaneously all the time. Even when you're sprinting all out, some energy is coming from your aerobic system. Even when you're jogging as easy as you possibly can, a tiny bit of anaerobic energy production is still happening. It's a sliding scale, right? We never want to have a moment where you flip a light switch and you just fall over because you don't have any energy or you're switching from one system to another. They transition seamlessly into each other. And the question is always about which system is doing the heavy lifting at any given moment. So when I talk about one system taking over from another, what I really mean is that it's become the dominant source of ATP. Cool? Okay, let's dig into each system individually. The first engine is your phosphagen system, and this is the one that kicks in for immediate, explosive energy. Here's what's happening inside your muscles. Sitting right there in each muscle cell, you've got small amounts of stored ATP plus a molecule called creatine phosphate. When you need energy right now, right this second, an enzyme breaks down that creatine phosphate, strips off its phosphate group, and attaches it to a spent energy molecule to create fresh ATP. This happens almost instantly. No oxygen required, no waiting around. It's your body's fastest way to produce energy. For runners, this is what powers that finishing kick at the end of a race. It's the first few seconds of a hill sprint. It's that burst of acceleration when you need to surge past someone or respond to a move in a race. But the catch is, your muscles can only store a very small amount of creatine phosphate. So this system gives you about 10 to 15 seconds of maximal energy before it's basically tapped out. It's kind of like a match. It burns incredibly bright, but it burns out fast. The good news is that with rest, this system reloads pretty quickly. Well-conditioned athletes can replenish their creatine phosphate stores in about 5 to 10 minutes, though less conditioned individuals will need some more time. This is actually why the rest intervals between all-out sprints need to be relatively long compared to the sprint itself. You're literally waiting for this system to reload so you can go again at the same intensity. And by the way, you may recognize the word creatine from the supplement creatine monohydrate or creatine hydrochloride. And this is exactly why people supplement with creatine. It gives you a little bit more energy for this particular energy system, and it allows you to push at that same intensity for a little bit longer before it burns out. Now, you may be thinking, Brad, I'm training for a half marathon. Why do I care about a system that only lasts 15 seconds? And that's a fair question. But even if you never plan to run anything shorter than a 10K, this system still matters. It's what gives you the ability to power up a steep hill in the middle of a race. It's what lets you shift gears and pick up the pace when you need to. And short, explosive efforts like hill sprints and strides that train this system also do something else really valuable. They improve the coordination between your nervous system and your muscles, which improves your running economy at every pace and in every energy system. So even as a distance runner, a long distance runner, you do not want to ignore this engine entirely. All right, so once that initial phosphagen burst fades after those first 10 to 15 seconds or so, your glycolytic system steps up to become the primary producer of ATP. This system works by breaking down glucose. Your body stores glucose in the form of glycogen, mainly in your muscles and your liver. And through a process called glycolysis, it breaks that glucose down to produce ATP. This system can produce energy faster than your aerobic system can, which is why it takes over during hard efforts. But it produces way less total ATP than the aerobic system, so it is still a limited resource. For runners, this is the system that's powering you through a hard 800 on the track, or the middle miles of a hard 5K race, or a really aggressive tempo effort. It's that zone where you're working hard, your breathing is labored, and you can physically feel the effort building in your legs. And speaking of that feeling building up in your legs, this is where I want to share something that might surprise you, because it surprised me when I first learned it. It has to do with what's actually causing that burning sensation you feel during hard efforts. For decades, the conventional wisdom was that lactic acid was the bad guy. You've probably heard this. Lactic acid builds up in your muscles, and that's what causes the burn. This belief goes all the way back to the 1920s when a researcher named Dr. Otto Meyerhoff was running experiments on frog legs. He was electrically stimulating the leg muscles of dead frogs, and he noticed that when the muscles eventually stopped twitching, lactate levels were really high. So he concluded that the buildup of lactate was what caused the fatigue. That study shaped how people thought about lactate for the better part of a century. And for a long time, runners, coaches, even textbooks treated lactate like a waste product, like exhaust fumes from your engine that were clogging up the system. But then along came a researcher named Dr. George Brooks, and his work basically flipped the whole thing on its head. What Brooks discovered is that lactate is actually a fuel source. Your body produces lactate all the time, even at rest, even right now as you're listening to this. At lower intensities, your muscles use lactate for energy. It gets shuttled around your body to other muscles that need it, to your heart, even to your brain. And lactate that isn't used up right away gets sent to your liver, where it's converted back into glucose that your muscles can use again. It's a recycling system. So, if lactate isn't causing the burn, what is? The culprit is actually hydrogen ions. When your body's cranking out ATP through glycolysis at a high rate, hydrogen ions get released as a byproduct. Those hydrogen ions make the environment inside your muscle cells more acidic, and that acidity is what interferes with your muscles' ability to contract properly. That is the burn. And here's the part that really blew my mind. Lactate actually helps buffer that acidity. It's part of your body's defense system against the burn, not the cause of the burn. Now, I'm not just telling you this as a fun fact for your next group run, although I do hope you share it, and I hope you say, I learned this from Coach Brad, but this actually has real practical implications for your training. Because once you understand that your body has this lactate shuttling and recycling system, you can start to understand what's actually happening during a tempo run. When you run at or near your lactate threshold, which is that comfortably hard effort where you could speak in short phrases, but definitely not have a conversation, you're training your body to clear and recycle lactate more efficiently. You're basically widening the pipeline. And as that pipeline gets wider, you can run at a faster pace before the hydrogen ion buildup overwhelms your system. That's why tempo runs and threshold work are some of the most valuable workouts in any distance runner's training plan. You're literally raising the ceiling on how long you can sustain a hard effort. In terms of duration, the glycolytic system is the dominant energy producer during hard efforts, lasting anywhere from 30 seconds to around 2 or 3 minutes. Beyond that, your body increasingly shifts into the oxidative system, even if the effort still feels hard. But again, no system ever acts alone. The glycolytic system continues contributing throughout the entire effort, which is why understanding how it works matters so much. Okay, now we get to the big one, the oxidative system. This is the engine that distance runners live and die by, and for good reason. The oxidative system produces ATP aerobically, meaning it requires oxygen. The process is more complex than the other two systems. It involves something called the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. Very complex topics. If you know, you know. If you don't know, you're probably better off. And all of this takes place inside the mitochondria of your cells. You might remember mitochondria from biology class as the powerhouse of the cell. And that description is actually spot on. These tiny structures are where the vast majority of your aerobic energy gets produced. Here's why this system is so important. It produces vastly more ATP than either of the other two systems. The trade-off is that it's much slower to ramp up. Your aerobic metabolism doesn't hit full power instantly. In well-trained athletes, it reaches full capacity in about 60 seconds. In less conditioned individuals, it can take 3 to 4 minutes. But once it's fully engaged, it can keep producing energy for hours. And here's the other massive advantage of the oxidative system. It can burn both carbohydrates and fat as fuel. This is a huge deal because your body's glycogen stores, your stored carbohydrate, are relatively limited. Even if you're fully topped off, you're looking at maybe 2,000 calories worth of glycogen in a non-carb loaded state. But fat, even the leanest runner out there, is carrying somewhere around 90,000 to 110,000 calories of fat reserves. That is an enormous fuel tank. When I first studied this stuff, there was a great analogy that really stuck with me. You can think of glycogen as a piece of paper. It catches fire immediately, it burns hot, but it's gone pretty fast. Fat is like a log in a fireplace. It takes longer to get going, but once it's lit, it burns for a really long time. Aerobic training teaches your body to light that log more efficiently. For runners, this system is powering you during your easy runs, your long runs, your recovery jogs. You know, that conversational pace where your breathing is relaxed and you feel like you could just run all day long. That is your oxidative engine cruising along in its sweet spot. Now, here's the part I really want you to pay attention to, because this is kind of where the rubber meets the road for your training. When you consistently do aerobic training, your body goes through some pretty incredible adaptations at the cellular level. Your mitochondria increase in both number and size. More mitochondria means more power plants producing more aerobic energy. Your capillary density increases, meaning your body builds up more of those tiny blood vessels that deliver oxygen to your working muscles. More capillaries means a better oxygen delivery network. Your heart gets more efficient. Your stroke volume increases, which means your heart pumps more blood with each beat. And because each beat is delivering more blood, your heart doesn't need to beat as often, which is why well-trained runners tend to have lower resting heart rates. And your body gets better at burning fat as a fuel source, which means you're sparing that precious glycogen for when you actually need it. These adaptations don't happen overnight. They build up over months and years of consistent aerobic training. And this is actually kind of encouraging because it means even if you don't feel like you were born with elite level genetics, every single week you spend building your aerobic base is making real measurable changes at the cellular level. The longer you train, the denser and more efficient your aerobic infrastructure becomes. That's one of the reasons experienced runners often outperform what you'd expect based on their raw talent alone. Their bodies have had time to build. All right, so now you understand all three engines. Let's make this a little more practical and bring it back to your actual training week. A well-designed training plan includes different types of runs, and each type targets a different energy system or the interplay between multiple systems. Let me walk you through how your common workouts map to these energy systems. Your easy runs and your long runs are primarily training your oxidative system. They're building that aerobic engine, growing mitochondria, expanding those capillaries, teaching your body to burn fat more efficiently. This is the foundation that everything else is built upon. And by the way, this is exactly why running your easy runs too fast undermines your training. If you push your easy runs up into that moderate effort zone, you're drifting into glycolytic territory. You're no longer in the sweet spot for those aerobic adaptations, but you're also not going hard enough to get a real glycolytic training stimulus. You end up in a no man's land where you're getting a watered down version of both instead of a strong dose of either. Keep your easy days easy, and I promise your hard days will benefit from it as well. Your tempo runs and threshold work live right at the boundary between glycolytic and oxidative. These are the workouts where you're training your body's lactate shuttling and buffering capacity, the stuff we talked about earlier. You're widening that pipeline so you can hold a faster pace before the acidity builds up and forces you to slow down. Your intervals and repeats are pushing into the glycolytic system with aerobic recovery between efforts. When you run hard for 2 to 5 minutes and then jog to recover, you're challenging your body to produce energy at high rates while managing that acidic environment. And then you're using the recovery period to practice clearing lactate and hydrogen ions aerobically. The recovery jog between intervals matters. That's where the aerobic cleanup happens. So when your plan calls for jogging recovery instead of just straight up rest, there's a reason for that. And then finally, your sprints, your strides, your hill sprints, these are targeting that phosphagen system plus neuromuscular coordination. Short, explosive, powerful efforts that train your body to produce force quickly and improve the communication between your nervous system and your muscles. These also improve your running economy, which is really just a fancy way of saying you become more efficient at every pace. Now, here's the big takeaway from all of this. Every run in a well-designed training plan is doing something specific. When you understand that, you stop thinking of workouts as just hard or easy, and you start thinking of them as targeted. And it's really that shift in thinking that separates purposeful training from just putting in the miles. I want to close with a real-world application of everything we just talked about, because I think it'll tie the whole episode together nicely. And it's something that many of you have either experienced firsthand or are worried about experiencing, and that is hitting the wall. If you've ever run a marathon or even just a really long training run, you may have experienced a moment where your whole body just kind of shut down. Your pace dropped off a cliff, your legs felt like they weighed 100 pounds each, and everything got hard in a way that felt fundamentally different from just being tired. That is hitting the wall. And what's actually happening here is glycogen depletion. Your muscles and your liver have run out of stored glycogen, and now your body has to rely almost entirely on fat for fuel. And remember, fat is a fantastic fuel source in terms of quantity, but it requires a lot more oxygen to convert into energy, and it produces ATP at a much slower rate. So you're forced to slow down pretty dramatically because your body simply cannot produce energy fast enough at the pace you were trying to maintain. Here's what's wild. Roughly 2 out of 5 marathon runners report hitting the wall, and 1 to 2% end up dropping out before the finish. But now that you understand the 3 energy systems, you can see exactly why this happens and what you can do about it. First, the more aerobically trained you are, the more efficient your body is at burning fat alongside glycogen from the very start of the race. This means that your glycogen stores last longer because you're not solely dependent on them. This is one of the biggest reasons why building a strong aerobic base through months of consistent, easy running matters so much for marathon training. Second, pacing plays a huge role. If you go out too fast in a marathon, you're burning through glycogen at a much higher rate than if you run at a steady, controlled effort. This is something I'd like to go deeper on at some point in the future, but for now, just understand that pacing is really an energy management strategy as much as it is a speed strategy. And third, proper fueling, both before and during the race, helps keep your glycogen stores topped off for as long as possible. We'll definitely do a full episode on race nutrition at some point, so stay tuned for that. But the point here is that hitting the wall is usually framed as a failure of mental toughness, like you weren't strong enough to just push through. But in reality, it's almost always a physiology problem. Undertrained aerobic fitness, poor pacing, inadequate fueling, or some combination of all 3. Understanding your energy systems gives you the tools to actually prevent it. And I think that's a lot more empowering than just being told to dig deeper. All right, I hope this episode gave you a new way of thinking about your training. The goal was not to turn you into an exercise physiologist. The goal was to give you a framework so that the next time you look at your training plan or the next time you lace up your shoes for a run, you understand the why behind whatever it is you're doing. So when you look at those easy runs you have scheduled this week, you know that they're building your aerobic engine at the cellular level, growing mitochondria, expanding capillaries. When you look at that tempo run, you know you're training your body to recycle lactate at a faster rate so you can hold a harder pace for longer. And when you look at your intervals, your speed workouts, you know you're teaching your muscles to produce energy at high speeds while managing the acidic byproducts that come along with that. When you train with that understanding, every run has meaning. And when every run has meaning, you stay more consistent, you stay more motivated, and you get better faster. That's what this is really about. And if you're looking for a science-based training system that takes all of this into account and trains all three of your energy systems alongside each other, that is exactly why we're building the VMAX app. It offers fully personalized training plans from the 5K all the way up to the full marathon, along with some individual training blocks for speed development, stamina development, and base building. And I'm excited to share the app is at the point where I'm actually using it myself. I'm tracking all of my runs with it, and I can't wait to share it with you. If you want to be the first to know when the app is available, go to vmax.run, enter your email address, and I'll let you know as soon as we launch. With that said, I want to thank you for spending some time with me here on the VMAX Running Podcast. I really hope it's been valuable. If you did enjoy this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a nice rating or review on the podcast platform of your choice. Regardless, as always, I just appreciate you being here. I appreciate your attention, and I appreciate you allowing me to be a part of your running journey. Thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.